Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Philippine Futures Thinking Society, PhilFutures, Dap-ayan. This afternoon's webinar is titled Youth and Futures Literacy. To formally welcome all of us to this event, may I call on the President of PhilFutures and the Senior Vice President and Dean of the DAP Graduate School of Public and Development Management, Dr. Lizanne Perante Calina.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much, CJ. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this conversation about youth, and futures literacy. Let me begin with this old adage from our Philippine national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal. Open quote, "The youth is the hope of the future," close quote. The context of this is that the youth plays an important role in nation building. And to realize this, there must be an enabling environment for the youth to deepen their perspectives towards a forward-looking country. So this one is really providing you a platform wherein you can freely discuss and converse about the future of the country. And this afternoon's conversation under the platform called Dap-ayan, the Philippine Futures Thinking Society aims to democratize futures thinking in the country through youth foresight, no? So that the youth will have a perspective on futures literacy and futures ready generation. This afternoon, we are glad, no? And we are privileged to have with us future leaders from the Philippines, from China, and Bangladesh. They will share with us case studies on how to engage youth in futures work. And I would like to express our deepest appreciation to Shakil Ahmed, KJ Louis Sheng, and Ann Bowers, along with Sheila Castillo, Noel De Guia, Celine, Grace Abelia, Russell Morales, and CJ Almodal. So I wish everyone a fruitful afternoon as we exchange ideas about our future, a future that cares. Hiraya manawari po sa ating lahat. Back to you, Sij.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lizanne. And I'm sure you are all excited to proceed with our conversation. So we will now proceed to the knowledge sharing part of our webinar. Please allow me to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is the Futures Learning Advisor of the Center for Engaged Foresight since 2018. She has facilitated Futures workshops for UNICEF Philippines, UN Cambodia, and the East-West Center in Hawaii. She is also one of the co-founders of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society. She became a member of the Association of Professional Futurists this year and has been a fellow of the Center for Engaged Foresight since 2012. Our speaker has worked as a technical advisor of Let Us Create Futures, a child-focused nonprofit in Cambodia. She has also worked as an organizational development specialist for VSO Cambodia, where she advised two provincial NGO networks in the provinces of Ratanakiri and Mondulkiri. Our speaker has worked as a social development advisor in Cambodia for 2 years and also worked as a social development professional in the Philippines for more than 15 years. Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about a glimpse into the future, please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Ms. Sheila R. Castillo. Ma'am?
Thank you very much, CJ, for that generous introduction. I'm going to share with you my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can
Wait
see your
lang.
screen.
What do you see in my screen? You're supposed
We
to
can
see this.
see all your slides, so you have to click,
Ayan.
yeah, slideshow.
Okay, so can you see this one? Yeah, okay, that's
Yes,
great.
perfect.
Ah, okay, so I'm very happy to be with all of you today. This is the first youth-oriented event of PhilFutures, and this is not going to be the last. This is just the start of the conversation, and we only have a few minutes here. So it's impossible to really give you something substantial, but what I'm going to do here is just to give you probably a glimpse of what a future is like. So just think of it as like what do you call it, like opening a window or cracking the window open to let some light in. Okay, so I remember a quote from my friend and colleague Sherman Cruz, and he asked, are Filipinos short-term centric or not? And I guess if we ask ourselves this question, I think a lot of us would say, no, 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 no. Filipinos are not uh, long-term centric. We are more short-term centric. And I guess we can see that in our, one of the lessons that we learned very, very early in school, this value that we call bahala na, no? Bahala na, que sera, sera, whatever will be. Anything, it's okay, you know, that's how life is. And honestly, I think that that is something that we should stop teaching in school. Aside maybe from like sociology classes, but really teaching that to kids only reinforces the short-termism of Filipinos, and I don't think that we should continue doing that. And the problem is if we are short-term centric and if we are thinking of the future in a very short term, let's say, for example, next week or next month, and we are not thinking about 5, 10 years from now, and we are not thinking about what will happen to us like 20 years from now. No, we should think about that. That's long-termism. The problem is if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And if you have tried like going out and not really knowing where you're going, you do not have a destination, well, you won't be able to arrive where you want to go, right? So it's very important for us to have that long-term view, for us to be able to have a guide on how to reach that place. So we are talking about the future here, and the future is the time that is yet to come. And when we talk about this, a lot of people are saying, oh, the future does not exist. Um, and um, and when we think about the non-existence of the future, we are just so intimidated by its unknowability. No, we don't know about it. What do we, how can we know about something that does not exist? No? And And because it does not exist, it cannot be predicted. There's no way of knowing it, and it's ambiguous, and it's there's just too much possibilities. And what do we know with this overwhelming idea that we have to work with something that we do not know and does not yet exist? The future does not exist in the present, but anticipation does. You know, this law from one of the renowned futurists, Jim Datery, said the future cannot be predicted, but because the future does not exist. But some futurists are saying that the future exists in the present in some shape or form. So another futurist, Suhail Inayatullah, he maintains that the future exists in the present in the form of our dreams, of our vision, of our desires, of our aspirations. So basically, the future exists in the present in the form of our hiraya, no? And that is the word that we are using here at PhilFutures, which means vision, or the fruit of our aspirations. And the future also exists in the present in the form of anticipation. So anticipation exists. So anticipation is a way by which we can engage the future. So without anticipation, there can be no freedom in making a decision. So how do you make decision about something if you do not like try to foresee what's gonna happen? No, it's not really making a decision, but just saying, okay, bahala na, no? Whatever will be, will be. And that is not freedom of decision. That is just simply diving into it and making a foolhardy action. And that is something that will result to some unfavorable consequences later. So the future, like the past, is an active aspect of the present. So time is a continuum, right? It is a continuum, and we are in the present moment, but in the present moment, we always have some aspect of the past and the future also. And even though, like I mentioned before, that the future is unknowable, the future is always here with us and is always happening in us in some shape or form, like in the form of our plans and our desires and our dreams and aspirations. So therefore, we cannot really, what you call this, disregard the future. It has to be dealt with in one way or another. And there is a fairly new field, at least in the Philippines. This is not new globally, but in the Philippines, it's quite new. And there were some practitioners of futures before, around 30 years ago, but this did not really, was not really, did not become mainstream. So when we talk about futures, it refers to a broad academic and professional field. So it's a professional field, it's a field of study. It's also about research methods and tools to develop a foresight capacity. Now, I want you to remember this foresight capacity, because this is what we want to really, really have as individuals, as organizations, as a nation. So what is this foresight? So foresight is a systematic, participatory, and multidisciplinary approach to explore mid to long-term futures and drivers of change. So we always say that when a person that experiences a problem, no, when we are faced with a lot of challenges, we always say, oh, because they have no foresight at all. And a lot of problems that we are experiencing right now, climate change, degradation of the environment, all of these discrimination of marginalized groups, all of these are happening because we did not have the foresight in the past to see that these things would impact our lives now. And so this is very important to have this capacity. It is said that all our knowledge is about the past and all our decisions are about the future. So what we know now for sure are about the past. Even our knowledge about the future is about the past. Um, is that a bit clear to us what I'm saying when we even our knowledge of the future is about the past because it is informed by our previous knowledge is it's informed by the data and the what do you call this no, the information that we were able to get hold of, so therefore it is already about the past. But in terms of making decisions, all our decisions are about the future. Whatever we decide to do now, whether it's a simple thing as eating lunch or deciding for our course that we're gonna take in university, all of these are about the future. So it's an continuous iteration and a continuous process of really engaging the future. There's no way around it. We have to engage the future. But when we are saying how to know the future, is there a way to know it? Can we predict it? No. Is there even a way to predict it? Do we need like a crystal ball or tarot cards to know it? Um, when we are asking these questions, we are not really asking the right questions, because what is to ask what is going to happen is the wrong question. The question should be, what could the future be? What might the future be? And it's very important for us to know that there is no 100% knowability about the future, but there is a way that we could anticipate, foresee, or even forecast some things that might happen in the future, and that's very important. So everything beyond the present moment has the potential to happen. And when you see this statement, it's very intimidating because of the word everything. Everything beyond the present moment has the potential to happen. It's so intimidating because of the limitlessness of scope of the future. No, there's just too much about it. There's too many factors, too many things, and a lot of things could change. Now, we might see ourselves going this way and something happens, and then we are faced with so many like potential probable futures, and that could really be intimidating. So we have to equip ourselves. There has to be a way by which we are able to engage the future um, in the present, despite the limitlessness of possibilities about the future. So how do we know that and what is the way to know about the future? It is called futures literacy. So futures literacy is a capability that offers insights into both the reasons and the methods humans deploy when they anticipate. So it's a field of study now. The DAP is setting up the first certificate course on futures thinking. I have done some courses and some trainings with the Center for Engaged Foresight together with my colleagues there on futures literacy. A lot of little efforts are coming in, and PhilFutures is talking about really pushing this forward, because it's very important for us to be able to like understand how to engage the future. It's as important as knowing how to read and how to count. You will see that later. So renowned futurist Jim Dator said that any useful idea about the futures should appear to be ridiculous. And so I think Jim Dator is saying, when we are talking about the futures, it's no use to talk about, there is some use to it, definitely, when we talk about the default future or the used future or the business as usual. There is some use to it, but that's not our intention. A futurist intention is to go beyond and see beyond business as usual, to see beyond the used futures, the default programs that we think about the future. So in a way, a futurist is a rebel in that we really think of and propose preposterous ideas that after some time becomes an accepted concept or idea. So it takes a bit of time to do that. And at first people might laugh at you. Oh my gosh, that's not gonna happen. But if you tell people 50 years ago that I should be able to give a seminar like this to you while you are several hundred miles away from me, even thousands of miles away from me, they would just laugh at you and say, that's ridiculous, that's not going to happen, that's preposterous. But then that is the main point of the futures, to be able to really, what you call this, identify these things. What is it that is beyond our regular range of vision? And that is our role as futurists. Imagination is the currency of futures thinking. And imagination, the good thing about this is not exclusive to, what you call this, to futurists. This is not an exclusive capacity to futurists. Everybody has the capacity to imagine. And that is very comforting in a way that we know that we can take part. We know that we can engage the future through imagination, through creativity. And like any other skill, imagination could be developed, it could be honed. And the more that you develop imagination, the more you develop your creativity, the more that you are able to improve in the way that you engage the future. So Dator also said we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us. So when we talk about the telephone in the age of Alexander Graham Bell, they wouldn't know at that time the possibilities of the telephone right now, that we are able to do these webinars. And it's not just technology, no, it's not just the tools. It's not just the hard tools that shape us. Just think of, for example, think of systems, think of ideas. I think of soft tools like what we use in our seminars, no? And these tools shape us, and in the way that these tools are also what do you call this, evolving, no? Evolving in the same way that it is also evolving us. And so in futures thinking, there are a lot of tools that we can use to be able to really, what you call this, hone our foresight capacity in our way to imagine and create something that does not yet exist. So I really like this 12 Laws of the Future by Thomas Frey. And he said the future is one of nature's greatest forces. And the future is so strong that it pulls us. And it doesn't matter if we are ready to engage the future. It doesn't matter. It will still happen. And so we have to realize that the force of the future, and we have to realize how we are going to place our energies in this very powerful force. And when we are thinking about this, we have to know that the future is not a human-centric force. So the future doesn't care about us. The future doesn't care if what will happen would impact us negatively or positively. It doesn't matter if what we think about, if we think about the future positively or negatively, if we think that we could influence it or not, it doesn't matter. The future will happen anyway. Uh, However, the future doesn't matter if humans don't care. So the human aspect of it is what makes the future matter. And we have to find ourselves in our meaning for the future, for it to be centered on us and not really just humans. I think it would be more so for the entire creation, for the environment, for the earth, no? He also said that the present is separated from the future by an invisible field of knowability. So if you think of time as a continuum, and there is the past, and this is the present, and that is the future, the field of knowability is here from the past to the present, and the future is unknowable. And that is very important. No, we cannot be haughty enough to say that we can predict the future, although there is a growing what do you call this is a growing field of metaphysical disciplines that are showing that the future could be predicted. I think Noel has something to say about that a bit later on. And So it's okay. I mean, it's okay not to know the future. That's not the point. And the point is, while not knowing about the future, how do you want to create it? How does it drive us, and how does it motivate us? You know? So that is the important thing. Oops, somebody's drawing something. Okay, I saw that. Okay. So amidst the backdrop of existing inertia, the future is ours to create. So this is the most important thing, I think. It doesn't matter if the future is not completely knowable, but we have some capacity to influence and create the future. But it's very difficult to do that if we do not have the capacities that we need to develop in ourselves to be able to create the future that we want. He also said that thinking about the future will cause it to change. Do you think that's possible? If you keep, I don't think it applies to math. You know, if I keep on thinking about math, it doesn't make me good at it. The good thing about the future is if you keep on thinking about it, if you make it part of your lamiraw, no, part of your worldview, then you can cause the future to change. And I think that is a very comforting thought and very empowering thought also. So another thing that I think is really very empowering is that when we are thinking about the future and its limitlessness, we could be overwhelmed as an individual because we only have a very limited capacity to influence and create it. However, everything that becomes big starts with something small, and so it is important for us as individuals to engage the future. It's very important for us in our organizations to try to think about the future, and not just as individuals and organizations, but also in our what do you call this, in our nation, in the entire humanity, to think that our small contribution would be part of the bigger whole, you know, that it could create an avalanche of change, or what other futurists are saying, tsunami of change. Oops, somebody's drawing on the board. Somebody's drawing on the board. So when we are trying to engage the futures, it's very important to ask the right questions. So when we are talking about the future, if we are not asking the right questions, then we are not engaging the future in the right way. we might be limiting ourselves with the questions that we ask. So it's very important for us to go beyond the what do you call this, to go beyond the set questions, the program questions, that the very first questions that come to mind when we think about the future. There is this futures exercise that tells a story about Rip Van Winkle. And this is a guy who slept for 20, 30 years. And when he woke up into a totally different world. And he is allowed to ask questions about the present, which is actually his future, because he woke up in the future. And if he asked things that are, you know, based on or limited to his previous knowledge of his past, then he will be able to miss a lot of things about the future or the world that he woke up to. So it's very important to really push at the boundaries of our thinking in asking the right questions. And one of the most important questions is, who is not in the room? This is very important when we're talking about futures. And a lot of futurists are saying now that futures thinking is a basic human right. So therefore, when we talk about who is not in the room, we are asking who do not have the agency and influence, and whose voice are not being heard, who is not being engaged. Everybody should be in it, because to create a collective future is to create it collectively. So we have to really push for this. This is one of the visions of the PhilFutures. Our vision is to ignite the Filipino Hiraya through the power of foresight. And we believe that futures thinking is not limited to futurists or to leaders of organizations and the government. Futures thinking is something that everybody should have access to. It's as important as the capacity to read and write. Although, even if a person does not have the capacity to read and write, they should still have the access to futures. No, especially when decisions are being made for their future, they should be part of that. And this is the reason why PhilFutures is holding this PhilFutures Dap-ayan as what do you call this, as an initiative to democratize futures thinking in the country. And of course, the youth will be living in the future more than me, more than some of us who do not fall into that category anymore. So it's very important that the youth are the ones we are really focusing on when we're talking about the future. We have to capacitate the youth about the futures. We have to make them futures literate so that they become a futures ready generation. So when we're talking about futures as a basic human right and futures in the aspect of justice, we always say that those that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but furthest from the resources and power. So let's change that. And one thing, the one way to change that is to democratize futures thinking and to offer futures thinking to everyone in the society, whether they are LGBTQ, children, women, elderly, differently abled, indigenous peoples, the basic marginalized sectors of the society. They should have the resources and the power of foresight to be able to engage and be part of the conversation in creating the future. So the youth must have the agency and influence to create the future that they want. And this is it. This is the time. And I'm very happy that a lot of the youth are joining us today, not just here in the Zoom room, but also on Facebook. this is just a first step. This is just opening a crack in the window. This is just the start of the conversation, and I'm looking forward to engage all of you again in the future. Let's talk about it, and let's all collectively create the future that we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miss Sheila, for your very insightful presentation. You know, I always read or hear the saying, if you do not know where you are going, any road will get you there. So thank you very much for highlighting in your presentation the importance of foresight today. And while the future, of course, doesn't exist today, anticipation exists in the present. So that is something that is very important for us to practice. Before we move to our next speaker, I just would like to greet our guests who are here today. We have students from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, from the University of the Philippines National College of Public Administration and Governance. We also have students, of course, from our very own Development Academy of the Philippines. Representing also our partners from the Department of the Interior and Local Government, we have Ms. Pam Carbonell. Ms. Sheila in her presentation mentioned the certificate course in Futures Thinking that the DAP through the GSPDM is going to conduct. If you are interested, we still have slots. My colleague Celine Abelia will be posting the details in terms of registration. All right, I will now move on to our next speaker, so please allow me to introduce him. Our second speaker has been in the forefront of change in the various initiatives of government. Since 2012, he has been sharing his forward-looking ideas in the different Senate committees he's been involved in. From 2013 to 2016, he ably represented the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Education, Arts, and Culture in several boards of state universities and colleges, or SUCs, all over the Philippines. His insight in the SUC boards gave rise to reforms in governance in higher education. During the same period, our resource person was the committee's representative to the National Commission for the Culture and the Arts Board of Commissioners and in the Board of Trustees of the National Museum of the Philippines. At the cultural front, he was instrumental in the Senate investigations of various heritage issues. At the moment, our resource person's commitment to national development and progress brought him to serve as a consultant to the Senate Committee on the SDGs, Innovations and Futures Thinking, where his ideas and insights of the futures are valued. A Scottish Rite Freemason, our speaker is an officer of the Gran Logia Nacional de Filipinas and a Knight Commander of Rizal. He is a friend, a colleague, and I can consider one of my mentors, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about next in line, Mr. Emmanuel de Guia.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for that, CJ. I'd like also to greet Shaquille and our guests here this afternoon. I'm here to talk about futures thinking o dalumat ng kinabukasan. Celine? So, you are deemed to be the next generation. Why the next? Next, please. So, always the next. Next. So, next generation.
What is life to offer me when I grow old? What's there to look forward to beyond the biting cold? They say it's difficult, yes, stereotypical. What's
Okay.
there beyond sleepy work and school life?
Celine?
Ain't nothing else round here but human strife. 'Cause there's
So you are deemed to be the next generation. Why the next? Because the foremost question in your minds are always what's next? What's the next trends? What are the next challenges? What's the next meal? Diba? Who's the next boyfriend? The next girlfriend? The next newsmakers, right? So you are the next. So again, Celine, next please. So you are deemed to be the inheritors of this generation. Unang-una, you are generation Y or you're generation Z. Some of us here are generation X. So for you of those who are in generation X, please in the chat box put heart and then thumbs up for those for you on those generation Y and Z. Please check lang natin, range and lang. We want to see how many of you are here are the millennials, and for those who are pretending to be millennials, the millennials. Okay, next please. So millennials are those born from 79 to 96. So if we're the age range of 21 to 38 in 2017, so you must be millennials. But if you were born 97 up to the present, you're deemed to be centennials. So again, welcome to this presentation. Next, please. In 2019, the National Culture for the Culture and Arts conducted a survey on the values that Filipinos, especially millennials, deem to be most important to them. After a year of research, 19 values were identified to be most valuable for Filipinos, especially the millennials. Okay, next please. So what are these 19 values that most Filipinos deem to be important in their lives? Number one, as always, it's family. Okay, number one is family. But people, look at what is number 19. Number 19, happiness. The last priority of Filipinos is to be happy. Diba? I mean, that's not right, people. We are here to be happy, and we are here to be a source of happiness to each other. Also, you must also notice that if you are going to think of the future, these values would drive you to look forward to what's best next for your family, for education, for yourself. Diba? Look at number 17. Love of country or pagmamahal sa bayan is only 17 in the values most prioritized by Filipinos, especially by millennials. Case in point, when you look at your Netflix or your iFlix right now, what do you see most? Korea dramas, diba? K-pop. We're losing to this avalanche of culture invasion because we prefer the culture or the arts of those countries. So for us to think of the future, we must also reevaluate how we value or prioritize those aspects of our lives, like family, education, self, and then, of course, happiness. We deserve to be happy, and we must work for a future that everyone is happy. Okay, next. So, right, now here. One for our global advisor, Anita Sykes-Keller, says that family orientation is what drives our future's work. Precisely because we always work harder, we always give our best for what's best for the family. So when you think of future, you think first of what's best for your family. That's how the future's work of most people, especially PhilFutures, is doing right now. Next. So what is futures literacy and why is it important? Okay. Unang-una, there is poverty of imagination. We need futures literacy because there's kasalatan sa hiraya. Ang mga Pilipino ngayon ay salat sa hiraya. When you say salat sa hiraya, we lack creativity. We are poor in creativity. We lack imagination. We do not think beyond the present. So we need to have a futures literacy a future of a future that we can think of using imagination. Next. Why we need futures literacy? First, a second is to overcome blind resistance. Pagtagumpayan ang bulag na pakipaglaban sa kinabukasan. We always think of the future as an adversary, as a domain or of the unknown, but we must be able to overcome the blind resistance so we can be powerful and victorious in our futures. Next, please. So, futures literacy, it's the lumat ng kinabukasan. I inquired from the commission so we can Filipino, what's the Filipino term for futures literacy? And they said that it's the lumat ng kinabukasan. Anticipatory, di ba? Thinking of what's current and being prepared for the future. Doable and of course desirable. Next. Next, please, Aline. So, imagination in the context of imagining not by AI, but imagining by the human mind. As the futures can only be imagined by Hiraya. You always use Hiraya because Hiraya is an ancient Filipino term that speaks of aspirations, of dreams, and of one's desire to create. That's what Hiraya is all about. And then it enables us to become aware of the sources of our fears and our hopes. Ano yung hopes and fears? Yung ating mga pag-asa at pangamba. We cannot move from life fearing what the future is all about and without hope. So we must be able to have that source of mind, of heart, where we can have a good future. But it also enables us to look and appreciate what the possibilities are, the diversity of the futures. It could be a good, a better, or the best future. Next. In our culture, can you think of examples where you have tried futures thinking? These are some. Okay, next. Sino sa inyo nakapunta na sa Quiapo sa mga tabi ng simbahan para magpahula? Diba? Taas nga ang mga kamay ng mga nagpapahula. Yung naghahanap ng boyfriend, ng bagong trabaho, diba? Okay, si Jelay nagtaas ng kamay. Oh. Jelay, so I hope it was a good fortune-telling session with you. And then also Sherman. Okay, next. You also have divination rituals like the Kanyao, diba? Where our friends up north would sacrifice animals to see and look into the future or to ask favors from the gods so they can have a better future. Next. Again, yung mahilig magpahula, I am sure, meron din diyang mahilig magpatawas. Diba? Again, raise your hands if you have done all these things in the past. Oh, tapas na pag may sakit. Next. So next is, we live in a book. Siguro right now you've been hearing about VUCA world. The world after COVID is all a VUCA world. So what is VUCA? Again, to the world of VUCA, let me explain. Next, please. So VUCA, the V is volatility. What's volatile or volatile? It means pabago-bago. Walang kasiguruhan. Everything changes in the moment. Unpredictable, dramatic, and fast. Just like with COVID, the changes were fast. I mean, every morning, every day, you're not sure of what's happening next. Diba? Next. Uncertain. That's the U in VUCA, meaning alanganin. Uncertain, no one can predict with confidence when the pandemic will end, when we'll have the cure, the vaccine, or when will you be retained or fired from your job, diba? So everything is uncertain, lahat alanganin. Next. Complexity. The world is more complex than before. Komplikado. Parang relationship ninyo. Minsan komplikado, minsan hindi, di ba? So those of you who have complicated relationships, put a broken heart or a heart in your chat box, please. I'm just kidding. So komplikado. Next. Ambiguous or malabo. The future has never looked so ambiguous as it's right now. You cannot be so certain of the best practices that you can follow, or you cannot be sure of their next steps in your job, di ba? Walang sigurado, lahat malabo. Next. So for millennials like you, what are the best factors that were identified for you to lead effectively in a world such as we have right now, in a VUCA world? Next. Yon. Always retain a clear vision. What do you mean clear vision? You must always look ahead without clutter, without much interruptions in your mind. With only a clear vision of what you want to have, what you want to be in the future. Always retain that clear vision. Next. Anticipate risk. Everything in life is about taking risks, diba? So if you don't take risks, you won't grow, you won't move forward. So with risk, you must be able to anticipate them, but especially, more importantly, you must be able to be prepared against those risks. Next. Think big picture. Wag selfie. Always think big picture. What lies ahead? Diba? Next year, we will be celebrating our quincentennial, the 500 years of the Philippines. Diba? So thinking big would be, what's the next 500 year for the Philippines? What's the next 25 years for you, for your family? Always think big picture. The small pictures are good, but always put those small pictures in the collage of the big picture. Next. So the real question is, what is the future that you want? Diba? I am sure most of you have images of what you can be, of what you want to be in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But what is really the future that you want? It is a question that you must always propound, because sabi ko nga, values always drive you to your future. So you must be able to be clear of those values in the future that you want for your family, for your life, for your country. Next. So, for those who want to have a good future, always have pag-asa. Yan yung hope, di ba? Pag-asa is hope. Huwag lang laging umaasa. Work to your future ng may pag-asa. Huwag laging umaasa. Next. Vision is pangitain. You must have a clear vision, pangitaing malinaw at maganda. Always look straight ahead, aim your eyes towards the goal, and work harder in reaching those goals. Next. Understanding or pangunawa. One thing that lacks in our world right now is understanding. So you must be able to see the both sides of the coin, diba? Both ends of the horizon, and then expand your mind. An expanded mind will never go back to its previous size. So when you think of the big picture, think of the big understanding. understand to be uh, try to be understanding of other people, their situation, and also of what are desires for the future. It can be a shared future, right, for all of us, right? So you must be able to empathize and understand each other's futures. Next, ito. Sabi nila, most millennials or centennials are whiners. Sa social media, you would see them always complaining, di ba? Always posting of those hinanakit, sama ng loob. So we must be able to transcend those kind of things. Uncertainties must be faced with courage or kabuuan at lakas ng loob, tapang. So we need to be courageous and brave about facing the future and be ready for the future. Next. Ito I believe most millennials are like this, madiskarte. That's one trait that millennials can be really be proud of. Sa eskwela, sa bahay, sa pag-ibig, lagi madiskarte. But you must always use this diskarte in threading the future, diba? Like for example, in business, entrepreneurship, diba? What are the next big ideas that will come from you? I have a big faith, and I trust that the millennials will really lead us to a great future because of your diskarte. Next. So you are the next generation, possibly the next newsmakers, also the next trendsetters. Pwede, di ba? And also, you could be the next challengers. And the next, you could be the next pathfinders of the futures. And most importantly, ito, inaabangan nyo to, the next election winners. Siguro some of you will be our government leaders, di ba? LGU, national government. So why not? You could be the next election winners. You could be the next Pacquiao, di ba? But more importantly, the most important of them all is to be the next visionaries, di ba? You have the vision and be the next visionaries. Next. Yan. Maraming salamat po. And Hiraya Manawari.
Thank you very much, Sir Noel, for your presentation. And thank you also for highlighting the importance of having a clear vision for the future, no? And having clear values that will lead us towards our desired future. And also for highlighting the importance of having hope or pag-asa so that we can attain the desired future that we have for ourselves, for our family, and for our country. But I think one of the greatest takeaways of our viewers from your presentation is to ascertain whether they are a millennial or a centennial. Ako, I'm so happy na nalaman ko na millennial pa pala ako. Anyway, I would like to greet our viewers and guests. We have very active participation from our state universities and colleges and other higher education institutions. We have guests from Cebu Technological University, IRIS, the Lubhasaan ng Lungsod ng San Pablo, and another one is from QSU. So I'm thinking this is Quirino State University. So please correct me if I'm wrong. We also have guests from DSWD Field Office and from the Office of the President of the Philippines. So thank you all for being with us this afternoon. Now we will proceed to our third speaker. Our third speaker is an educator, a futurist, and a storyteller, and part of the leadership team at Acumen Academy in Bangladesh. In 2019, he was recognized as a young global changer at the Global Solutions Summit in Berlin and as a Joseph Jaworski Next Generation Foresight Practitioner by the School of International Futures. Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about his journey with futures thinking, engaging youth in Bangladesh. We have Mr. Shakil Ahmed. Sir, kindly unmute your. Okay, there you
Yeah.
go.
Okay. Thank you. So, which is more important? Ask the big panda, the journey or the destination. It's the company, said the tiny dragon. I just came across this post in my newsfeed the other day. Actors and personalities and foundation and inspiration I'm grateful for, without whom the plot of these stories would be incomplete. And when I look at back at my journey as a youth myself, there's a bit of shock and awe. And this is a picture of me, if you can be surprised. But depending on what you're looking at, depending on which definition, I'm still considered youth. And irrespective, today I find myself describing myself. All these three things are actually the same thing. When we're young, we always listen to this question. And it's not like I had the foresight back then to say that when I grow up, I'll be a futurist. And because that word was just not part of my vocabulary. What I wanted to do, however, was that I was really inspired and sparked off by all the stories I was exposed to. And truth to be told, I wanted to be an archaeologist. The sense of adventure in Indiana Jones was indeed fascinating. And the more I read about history and archaeology, I figured that probably the best way to learn about the past was not just studying the past or like digging relics, but to actually go back in time and travel to the past. So when I was young, I wanted to make a time machine. Grade 6 in the year 1997, when people would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say, I want to conquer time. And of course, the more you delved into building time machines, you realize that the task isn't easy, right? And the journey led me to study further the nature of time and thus the nature of reality, to the extent that I ended up studying physics and mathematics in university. In spite of having failed in mathematics back in grade 6, and how I bounced back is a different story of education. But just before I did, pose me with the question, okay, it's great that you'd like to study physics, but how are you going to help the people of your country? And to be honest, this question stuck with me. How am I going to help the people of Bangladesh? And originally, I wanted to put a picture on the slide, a slide that kind of evokes help people Bangladesh. But there's not just one image that comes to mind. There's so many. And to be honest, I used to be much more nationalistic in the past, and quite blindly so. But there has been evolution in that thinking, which I'll elaborate in a bit. However, back then, Bangladesh used to be in my mind. And even before I left, I used to think about the phenomena of the brain drain. And I think a lot of us know what this brain drain is. Supposedly bright minds leaving and not coming back. And I'm not going into the details of this exact evolution of thinking, but even though I knew that through physics, there are indeed good things that we could do for mankind. Fact that people and communities around the world should ideally be in a position to solve their own problems instead of being dependent on other countries or communities to solve their problems for them. However, to be in that position, I thought you need to have a good research infrastructure so that people in their own communities, wherever it is, whether it's urban, rural, developing, doesn't matter, but people in general need to be able to have the tools to do their own research to solve their own problems. But how do you actually build a research infrastructure? For that to happen, you need an education infrastructure that can enable people to build this research infrastructure and be part of this research infrastructure. And thus, I chose education to be my site of struggle. For 3 years, I worked in an organization called Logic Mills in Singapore, 3 years also because that was the duration of my bond with the Singaporean government. And in Logic Mills, I used to teach thinking skills through board games, experiential learning, and Socratic questioning. My boss was a philosophy professor, and while physics helped me to develop that scientific quantitative mind, I think this aspect of the journey with philosophy helped me to open up, be more qualitative, inductive, or intuitive. And the 3 years enabled me to work with kindergarten children, primary school students, secondary school students, university students, corporate training, adults, teachers, and so on. But I ended up, among all these age groups, I ended up respecting kindergarten teachers the most. Because at the end of the day, the work of kindergarten teachers is so foundational. And I think we can all empathize that even in university, we probably didn't have the best teachers. Maybe they're good researchers, but in kindergarten, it really helps to have one of those, a foundational teacher. So after those 3 years, I earned to come back to Bangladesh, right? And then in 2012, I enrolled in a master's in educational leadership and school improvement offered by the BRAC Institute of Education Development in BRAC University, and also found a job there as an educational researcher. And that was where I got exposed to my first workshop in futures thinking. This year was also possibly quite a pivotal year in my conceptual framework, given my master's program, but also at the same time, I happened to be part of a workshop where we explored the futures of BRAC University in the year 2030. And this was back in 2012. And Sohail Inayatullah was the facilitator, someone who I do consider my mentor now in this field. Why was I chosen for this workshop? I don't really know. It was because the people who were participating in this workshop was the vice chancellor, the pro vice chancellors, heads of department. But I believe for diversity's sake, they wanted youth in the room, or young voices of the university to also be in the room, but to also act as scribes and note takers as well. Ever since that workshop, there was no turning back. I started using the methods I learned in the workshop in a whole range of spaces. And probably what inspired me the most about future studies or futures thinking, and of course, note that whenever we say futures thinking, future studies, futures is in plural, right? Because there are multiple futures, not just one future. But what inspired me the most was probably a tool called causal layered analysis. And I'm sure some of you might already be aware of this tool, but I'll tell you why this was particularly inspiring. So of course, we talk about an iceberg, we talk about things that we see in the visible reality, things that we see around us, but there's so many different things that are the causes of what really happens in our society. So whether it's corruption or violence or climate change, right? There's a whole myriad of reasons why this is happening. And what really struck me was that a lot of the times we're just trying to change systems and policies and laws, changing governments, changing who's in government and all that. But then at the end of the day, what really struck me is that even despite the systemic changes, what really matters is that what really has to change aside from systems is also mindsets and worldviews. Because if people's mindsets and beliefs don't shift, then irrespective of who's in the system, what changes you're making in the system, you won't see change in reality. And of course, a lot of the times, a lot of theories of change stopped here. But what was particularly inspiring was the role of stories, the role of movies, songs, narratives, myths, and metaphors in culture. It's essentially the storytellers, like the filmmakers, the novelists, the dancers, the science fiction writers, the artists, the painters, the sculptors. These are the people who are actually planting the seeds of the future, essentially planting the seeds for our new mindset so that we can shift the system. And of course, I mean, like I said, like even though, I mean, I'm sure if you look back, there are all these stories that reflect and have shaped who you are today. Whether it's a joke that someone said or a story, maybe your grandmother or grandparent told you, or maybe it's something that you watched. But stories were so key. And what was interesting is that it takes 0 to 5 years to change, on the top 5 to 10 years to change systems, 10 to 20 years to change, right? Or change the story. So for example, the story that men are better than women or boys are better than girls is essentially a male patriarchal, a male chauvinistic story. Something that if you look at Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty, you'll see that the prince is always saving the princess. And those kind of stories keep on perpetuating that mindset. But now we see that stories like Moana, we see stories like Inside Out or like Brave, where the roles are changing, right? And it doesn't like anyone like they it doesn't have to be always the princess saving the princess, right? Like I mean anyone can take power, right? And I think those stories are very foundational in shaping our minds. So, having said that, neither revolution or reformation can ultimately change a society. So, of course, a history book will say, oh, the revolution of this year and that year. But rather, you must tell a powerful tale, one so persuasive that it sweeps away the old myths and becomes a preferred story, one so inclusive and that it gathers all the bits of our past and our present into a coherent whole, one that even shines some light into the future so that we can take the next step. If you want to change a society, then you have to tell an alternative story. So again, I think since most of the audience is in the Philippines, think about the stories in your society that are shaping Philippines as in now, and what are the stories that you need in the future. Having said that, I also just want to quickly tell you how Ivan Illich also kind of helped me think about things differently. So Ivan Illich also wrote a book about deschooling society, right? The fact that schools should no longer exist in society, that schools are actually bad for society. And of course, that was really weird for me because I was always in education and all that. But then his argument that he wrote in the 70s is that schools create more inequality. School creates an educated class and uneducated class, but the educated class is not really that much educated. An uneducated class doesn't mean that they're uneducated. They also have an education. They're also learning. And he talks about that instead of schools, that why can't all of society be educational? Why can't we have webs of where people are learning from each other, where we're connected? So there's a lot of interesting things there. And I think one other quote of Ivan Illich that really struck me was that you should work with people who can swear back at you at the language you understand. So a lot of the times we work with people who can't talk to us, who can't communicate with us, right? Just because we probably from a more privileged background, we don't understand their language. But there are people all around you, even like probably outside your house right now, there are people who can swear back at you at a language you understand. And Ivan Illich tells us to work with these people. And one other thing that helped me during that year was also a thinker called Rabindranath Tagore, where he's the one who also has an alternative mindset about what schools should look like, but also about nations. And he was a critique of nationalism, the fact that the concept of a nation is artificial. After all, it's human beings. Like if you look from the world map, if you look from space, you won't see any borders. But we are the ones who create the borders, create the concept of countries, and of course sometimes to the extent that results in violence and not liking each other incompatibly. And so these are kind of the thoughts that are kind of shaping me back in 2012. And there was no turning back, right? So back University Futures was there. From there, I got myself into storytelling when I was in school. I used to like drama, but now I had a reason why I had to be part of storytelling. So I got into spoken word, into theater, into stand-up comedy, into film, into writing, right? And at the same time, I started taking futures methods wherever I went. So to shape the futures of secondary schools. When I was working for Teach for Bangladesh in the Philippines, you have Teach for Philippines as well. So I used to work there. I even did workshops with young trade union leaders on the futures of work. I worked with young people who are working on policy and since they work as policy advocates in the communities. I work with like storytellers, people who are working with gender and storytelling, with Acumen Fellows right now, people who are working with poverty and social justice. And finally, there's this thing about, I think one of the work that inspires me is this work that I did with the Futures of Education in Bangladesh in 2041 with our Prime Minister's office, A2I. Because even back then, when I did my first workshop, I heard that Singapore had a futures unit in its Prime Minister's office. Korea had a futures unit. So why can't Bangladesh also have a center for futures in the Prime Minister's office, which can also, so in 2012, that came to my mind. 2016 was the first time I contacted the Prime Minister's office. 2019 was when the first workshop happened. And 2020, I saw the education ministers actually use language from this futures work. And that was kind of like a tear-jerking moment, to be exact. So of course, some of my lessons learned in the futures of youth is that, of course, we can always say fancy statements that youth are the future. And I'm sorry, I think just now, I think in the beginning, we also, our founders also probably use these statements that youth are the future, education, education, education. And of course, everyone's going to, I mean, to the extent that youth has also become a sector, right? There's ministries of youth. But what does it mean to be youth? And is youth the future? I mean, of course, we all are the future, right? And I think even especially in a day and age when longevity is increasing, I think each and every part of us has a role to play in the future. So sometimes I feel like we shed off responsibility by saying that the youth are the future. And of course, is it just an age group or is it a disposition, right? Is it a mindset, right? So that means sometimes there can be young people who are already very old, or there can be old people who are pretty youthful in their mentality. So does youth mean that you are open to more risk? Does it mean that less people are dependent on you? You don't have to provide necessarily for your families. Therefore, you can take more risks, because sometimes when people start having families, then they don't need to take that much risks. So is it that, like, what is it about youth that makes youth, and why are people so concerned about youth? Is it that to do this, next day you want to do something else? But then sometimes when people are mid-career or senior career, it's difficult for them to pivot. But then should we create a system or a society where people are able to shift and pivot even later in life, right? Like, how can we create a community where people can continue to be youthful even till the end of their days? Here are some potential ideas for solutions. So one thing to note is that when it comes to Maslow and Bloom, Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about basic needs, but then at the top of Maslow, we have self-actualization. Bloom, at the bottom, we have memorization. It's a taxonomy of educational objectives. At the top, we have creativity. And the reason why I'm saying this, because a lot of the times in our programming, we only think about basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter when it comes to the oppressed and all that. But then everyone wants to have an identity. Everyone wants to have purpose. It doesn't matter which sort of background you're from. And I think a lot of youth, a lot of people, we crave purpose, that we seek purpose in our lives. And sometimes secular societies or our educational systems are not able to provide purpose. And the reason why is because a lot of our pedagogical spaces are lecture-based. So for example, right now, I'm just giving a lecture, right? Sometimes I find that even in the political space, we're giving low. But when it comes to theories of learning, it's important that we interact with each other, we talk to each other. And that means it is through this talking to each other that we give people purpose. I mean, I'm sure we talk about radicalization as being a problem in different countries, right? Well, why do people become radicalized? It's because they seem to be getting a purpose. But is it possible that even for us to think about how can we create purpose for a purpose of love, for a purpose where we are able to be more tolerant of each other, for a purpose where we are working together and not competing with each other all the time? And school doesn't have to be the only place of learning. Even in COVID-19, we know that we're learning from home. But then why can't all of your city, like why can't the whole city of Manila or all our villages, all of the space be educational? That means wherever you roam, there's a potential way to learn. And another thing that we're talking about is gross national inspiration. That we talk about GDP, GNP, and we're competing with each other. Bhutan talks about gross national happiness. Japan and Korea talks about gross national coolness. But I'm trying to propose something called gross national inspiration. How inspired are the citizens of our country, and how inspiring are other people of other countries by your action? So are the people of Philippines, are they inspired? And how inspiring are the people of Philippines to other countries around them? And the futures of Bangladesh is not just the futures of Bangladesh. Futures of Philippines is not just the future of Philippines. What happens in the Philippines affects Bangladesh. What happens in the Bangladesh affects Philippines. What happens in the US affects different places, right? So it matters everywhere what is happening, right? Even like you might have local elections, but even in the Philippines, who gets elected also matters to me. In Bangladesh, who gets elected should also matter to you, right? In the US, obviously, it should matter around the world who gets elected, right? So, and that's why we're all, the whole world is in this together. And we're working on something called Next Gen Edu, a global platform where we're trying to shape good ideas in education. But I guess some provocations just to leave you with. It's something that even as a next generation Foresight practitioner that I won last year, I'm working on. It a space where anyone can walk to, they can learn whatever they want, they can act on it, and then they can of course walk off and build whatever they want. Can you create a space like that? It doesn't have to be a school, it can be anything. And then we're thinking something called Tomorrowlands. That in Tomorrowlands, like it can be a wall in your community, it can be a library, it can be a park or a stage, but can artists, storytellers, curators, educators, community members come together and actually create visions of the future and discuss and have these conversations, right? And I think it's pretty simple, right? I think each and every one of you right now is a sitting or walking Tomorrowland, right? Each and every one of you has the potential to talk to someone else right now. And like I said, any useful statement should appear to be ridiculous, right? And I think the first presenter, when she said it, I just brought this back because sometimes the things that you see might be crazy statements. Put it into the chat if you have any useful statements about this, right? And for example, like we always see countries dividing up, but why can't one country unite with another country and become a new country? Like, why not, right? That's a ridiculous statement, but is it useful? Who knows? You are the writer of your own story. Like, you know what story you want. And essentially, I wish you luck in writing your own story and going forth. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shakil Ahmed, for sharing your story with us and for sharing your insights on the futures of youth. I hope that your story will inspire young Filipinos who are watching us today to engage in the practice of futures thinking. So thank you for your time this afternoon, sir. We will now move on to our fourth speaker, who is joining us all the way from London. Our fourth speaker is a civic participation practice lead of the School of International Futures. To talk about the School of International Futures youth initiatives, let us all welcome Ms. Ann Bowers. Hi, Ms. Ann. Yeah, I will unmute you. Ms. Ann?
Hi there, good morning.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
And can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great, okay, so first of all, to say that even though I am maybe a little bit older, I still feel deeply young. So thank you very much for having me. And I'm still very excited about the untold future that I'm unwrapping, despite having unwrapped some of my untold future already. My name is Anne, and yes, I'm here saying hello to you from London, where it's morning, not afternoon. And I lead the new civic participation practice at School of International Futures. And what I'd like to do today is tell you about three things. First, a bit about the School of International Futures as a way of introducing you to the work that we do and inviting you to sort of join our wider network of friends and colleagues. Then to tell you a bit about work we're doing to really elevate and illuminate the voices of young people, millennials, post-millennials, probably not pre-millennials, and then to tell you about a specific project that we're doing with the WHO's Western Pacific Region Office and invite you to join in that project. I have to apologize from the outset, as somebody who was educated or not in the US, I only speak one language. So this will be in all in American English. So apologies for not being able to echo my fellow speakers who are able to speak in more ways than one. And please feel free to interrupt me and ask questions or put questions in the chat, which I will keep an eye on. So the first thing to say is that the School of International Futures is a virtual organization. We worked virtually before COVID-19 hit. And the reason that we do that is we're particularly committed to making sure we have multiple voices in and around our team. And as it says on the beginning slide, systems are cracking, and we're really excited, and we're excited about playing a part in putting them back together in new ways. So I think I don't need to sort of rehearse this with you. You've heard this from a number of the speakers beforehand, that the past hasn't been entirely kind to the present. It's definitely not been kind to the future. And for people who are the generations that come after us, that's really feels really visible and present in a way that it wasn't necessarily when I was growing up in the 80s. And we know that there's this sort of what we call a triple crisis of ecological emergency, governance, and inequality. And that these are not crises that can be solved by the existing institutions, whether they're national, regional, or global. So something has to change. Our priority is to try and make sure that today's decisions are much better informed, and it picks up on Shakil's point around making sure that we're bringing stories into the picture, into the discussion, just as much as we might bring other forms of evidence that have seemed to have been prioritized or have been prioritized, particularly in the West, for such a long time. So I don't need to spend time telling this group the benefit of foresight. What we all know from all of the work we do in different ways is that people are sometimes afraid of these things. They're afraid of the long-term vision, and they're afraid of the risk. And all that we can do is help them understand that by facing those and grappling with them and grasping them, you can be much more future ready and alert. So, oh, I didn't take my yellow boxes off. Give me 1 second. This is what happens when I edit at 6 in the morning. So, what does SWAF exist to do? SWAF exists to advise and inspire organizations, institutions, and systems to incorporate foresight into their strategy. And we do that in a number of ways. We do that by working directly with institutions. We do that by supporting people and running the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Program, and supporting and endorsing work by people like Shakil. And we do that by developing our own projects that we think are necessary, but haven't been sponsored by any particular organization. And the other thing I would call your attention to is at the very bottom of this list is structural resilience and responsiveness. So we know that enabling foresight thinking and making sure it happens for impact is not a short endeavor, and it's not something that if it happens once, that's enough. It needs to be systemic, it needs to be embedded, and it needs to be resilient to the changes in whims, focus, and priorities of leading governments, leading private sector organizations, etc., the people who are making big decisions. In our work, we use a 4-stage process. We scope, we order, we investigate, and we integrate. And the reason that it's important that we have this 4-stage process is that quite often we are dealing with institutions and individuals who aren't necessarily comfortable with complexity. And so giving them some structure to the story that we're taking them through helps them grasp what often feels ungraspable. Other people have already mentioned complexity. Basically, that's what we're here to support, is how do you grasp the complexity of the future and make decisions about it today. So I'm just going to stop there for a minute, because that's the sort of basic introduction to SWAF, and just have a check in the chat if there's anything particular. Are there any questions at this point that people want to ask, or anything you want to say? All right, I will keep going then. So what about young people? And by young people, we mean sort of 18 to 30, which I sadly can't put myself in anymore. So what are we doing? We're growing what we call a global network of next generation practitioners. And this isn't necessarily next generation just from an age perspective. It's also next generation from a functional perspective, that in terms of people who are new to the practice of foresight. What is our ambition? Really to accelerate the activity and the visibility of people who are doing foresight, particularly in the global south and the global east. Just remembered another yellow box that I'm going to remove as I go. Here are just some examples, and I don't need to highlight, Shaquille, of the people who have won our annual Next Generation Practice Award. I think the thing to highlight here is that we focus on particular regions, we focus on particular activities like people working in groups, and we want to make sure that we are giving prominence to and giving profile to people who are working on particularly cutting edge work. And then we are growing what we call a sensing network. So a way for people across the globe to share what they're seeing and feeling and hearing, and using all of their senses, but particularly going beyond the mind, beyond the kind of intellect, to say what are the kinds of things that are emerging. And we are starting to build local networks, including one in Asia and the Pacific region. What's the point of our network? To really bring together voices from across the globe on key future issues. And we're really committed to what we call democratizing the future. And I'm sure you've heard this phrase. And it means lots of things to lots of different people. And I appreciate an irony of a kind of Western white woman with an American accent talking about democratizing anything. I think there is something about making sure that we create the space for all of the voices and use all of the privilege that some of us might have to really elevate and give prominence to those voices. So now I'm going to stop for another minute before I go into some of the work that we're doing specifically on bringing young people's voices and young people's perspectives into strategic conversations. Any questions or thoughts at this point? Okay, I will keep going. I can't see everybody, so if I keep going and you were trying to say something, then just jump in over me. Some of the work that we're doing, and this is one of the things we're, I would say, proudest of and most focused on at the moment. And this is a piece of work that we've generated rather than we've had commissioned by any particular institution, which is called the National Strategy for the Next Generation. So I'm not going to read you everything that's on this the slide of the children sort of walking into the distance. What we are doing is working closely with the Cabinet Office in the UK government and the Number 10 office, which are the two most central strategic offices in UK government at the moment, and others across the UK in particular, to bring together experts in concepts of the future, young people, decision makers, and lots of other forms of public voice to think about what would happen if you framed your strategic question around what does this mean for the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, rather than what does this mean for today. And if, like Wales and other countries, you framed your thinking 30 years from now and then worked back into your strategic decisions, what would those look like and how would they be different than the relatively short-term ones that people are taking today? So it's a pilot, and we're very conscious that it's just UK focused, and it's a bit like Shaquille's work of lobbying central government to expand its horizons and expand its thinking. That's what we're doing in the UK, and frankly, if we can get that to work here, then we should be able to transplant that to a number of other governance. And the reason I say here is that at the moment, the UK government, for those who have been paying a bit of attention to it, is particularly closed and particularly uninterested in complex thinking and kind of collective thinking about the future. And where it does talk about it, particularly in some of the Prime Minister's advisors, it's quite kind of techno-ecstatic. It's quite kind of technology is going to save us all, so let's focus there. I'm not 100% sure all of that should be recorded, but there we go. That's my political vision of where we stand, and the kind of appetite. What we have found really promising is that there is actually quite a lot of appetite in some of the places in number 10 and in the Cabinet Office to think about this next generation concept and to start from the future and work back in today's strategies. And so whatever we can do to help elevate that and to help expand that is quite exciting. So then I want to come on to the specific project that put us in touch with Sherman and others on the call, which is a project we're just kicking off with the Western Pacific Region Office of the WHO. And this is the region that covers most of Australasia, although it doesn't include the kind of Asian subcontinent. And it's part of the WHO's commitment to increase its collaboration with young people, and to continue to build a conversation and structures for a conversation with young people. And so what we are doing is over a 4-week period, spread out over 5, but basically over a 4-week period, we're asking people to share 2 things. One is to share the kinds of conversations, blogs that you might read, art you might see, music you might hear, Instagram posts you might experience, TikTok videos you might come across that are shaping or informing or reflecting your views of the future. And that's a sort of quick daily journaling exercise using a tool called SenseMaker. And then the second thing we're asking people to do is answer 1 question a week about the future. So the first question would be, what is your vision of the future, and where does health play a role in this? And that's because the people asking the question are the WHO. Then we'll move on to a question about how do you get to that future, and then a question about power and agency, and where the power and agency for change sits, and also where the power and agency in the future sits. And there's 2 ways you could be involved in this project. One is you could do both these things. You could journal and answer the questions on a weekly basis. And the other is to just answer the weekly questions. And what's really exciting is that SenseMaker is a tool that helps us to start draw natural language programming kind of insights out of what people are putting in and start to look at themes across different demographics, across different time periods. Are there particular themes that are coming out more strongly than others in terms of what's shaping and informing and inspiring people's concepts of the future? If you choose to participate in the project, our commitment to you is that we will be hosting 2 workshops with the WHO, and you would be invited to participate and to help deliver those, that we will share the collective data and the findings, and that we would invite you to join our growing Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network, and particularly the Asia subgroup. And also as an organization, we would share with you the things that are inspiring our thinking about the future, and also how we think about the future. So that's really all I have to say. This is sort of a quick overview of the work that we're doing, and inviting you to stay in touch with us, and also specifically inviting you to join this project. I will put the link to the project joining information into the chat for ease of people being able to look at it. And I will stop sharing my slides because that's sort of it. So I will stop there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Anne. I'm not sure if you can join us later during the open forum. Will you be able to join us?
I'm really sorry. I'm not going to be able to. I'm actually on holiday at the moment, but I am really happy. But it's totally fine. I'm really happy to. What I will do is I'll put my email address and my Twitter handle into the chat. and I'm happy to talk to you. I'm back after this week, and I'm happy to speak to people any other way, any other way. I just need to drive a long way in an hour or two.
Yes, we understand, and thank you so much for your time.
But I can stay for a little bit longer now if there are questions now that people want to. Are we waiting for questions for the open forum? Sorry.
Yeah, but I think there is just one question in the chat box that maybe you can already respond to. Thank you so much for sharing what you're doing at the School of International Futures. I think it would be a great honor and a pleasure if in the future there will be an opportunity to collaborate with you, with PhilFutures and us at the Graduate School of Public and Development Management of the Development Academy of the Philippines. Again,
That would be great. I realize I've just put my information into just your chat. So let me just put the link and my email address out to everybody. And there was a question about whether we are personally trying to promote futures thinking as a school of thought. Yes, without question. And as a school of thought, particularly for impact. So we're promoting futures thinking as a tool for making change, not as a good in its own right.
mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you very much for having me, everybody. I'm sorry I can't stay for the chat. It's been really fun to listen, and it's really inspiring to. It's just really inspiring to see how many people there are. Makes me feel a little bit more hopeful. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, and have a good day ahead.
And do share questions with the hosts, and you can feed them back to me, and I can try and answer them in a way you can then share with everyone who's attended or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Now we will move on to our last but definitely not the least speaker. Our speaker is a co-founder of Futurist Circle, China's first futurist community, and founding partner of Future Matters. He is also an adjunct professor at ESSCA School of Management and Schema Business School. Previously, he joined Design Affairs, which is part of Accenture, Make a Point, which is China's first social design agency, and started an innovation consultancy for tech startups in both China and Silicon Valley in the United States. He is an advertising council member at GLG, an ambassador of the Global Scanning Network at Copenhagen Institute for the Future Studies, a member of World Future Society, La Futura Trendspotter Network, as well as the China Ambassador of China America Innovation Network, or CHAIN. He has an educational background in MBA in Design Strategy at California College of the Arts, an MBA and MS Finance at West Virginia University, and an economics degree for his undergrad. Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about social disruption and Chinese youth community in the global pandemics, let us all welcome Mr. Luis Keji Zheng. Good afternoon, sir. May you kindly unmute your microphone.
Yeah, hi, Seiji. Hello, everyone. Good
Hello.
afternoon. I'm gonna just share my my screen. See, 1 second. 1 second. Just okay. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks the invitation from Sheila to give this quick presentation at Philippines Future Thinking Society, which is a great honor for me to talk with you. And I would also like to take the quote from Sheila, her keynote that the youth must have the agency and influence to create the future they want. That's also something I'm going to talk about in my presentation today about the social disruption and the Chinese youth community in the global pandemics. And from this cover page, we see this is made by Kath Herring from New York City. It's about, it was painted to commemorate the 200 years anniversary of the United States Constitution. And the title plays the phrase, "We the people," from the beginning of the document. And the picture doesn't actually say much about the Constitution set by the artist, but bringing people from all different backgrounds and all different places to work on this mural to do something unified. And that has to do with the Constitution. And this is made by the artist along with many high school students from Philadelphia. So this is something we see from the United States. And today I'm going to talk about something more about the Chinese youth community. And for me, as the host just mentioned about, I'm a futurist and innovation strategist. I was educated and worked in the Silicon Valley, US. And then I'm also doing some, consulting and teaching and in, future studies, design strategies, all kind of stuff. So when I was working and studying in the US, I have this vision that I got this, the future thinking, this methodology from Stanford University. And I think that's something really opened another door for me. And then I want to bring it to Chinese market, to the Chinese audience, something like I want to start an organization there that empowers the younger generation to find out their own alternative futures. So that's how the Future Circle is founded, which is the Chinese first futures community that connects those professional futurists, the trend spotter and the change makers, and with this futures thinking and dedicates to explore the future by organizing and participate in the various activities. For example, we do this kind of futures roundtable talk. We invite the global professional futurists from all over the world to keep like either like an in-person or physical or remote speech about how they think about the future. We do this global trend spotting network. We create some future scenario collage exhibition once a year. Also, we do this visit through our trend safari. We have the methodology training for these either like the working professionals or the public. We do the keynote speech at different kind of festivals and events. And also we have this kind of future envisioning workshop with this kind of more like a human perspective about the future, not about technology itself, not about business or entrepreneurship. It's more about human-centric or human-friendly future we want to think about, we want to collaborate together. Yeah, and we choose like each most edgy city we think about, and we go there to have the visit. We do the field trip, we do the visit, we talk with the local, visionaries, futurists, and have an idea about how the future gonna be work. The future is just unevenly distributed everywhere. That's why we want to, spot this kind of future signals from the different cities all over the world. And today, I'm gonna talk about 3 parts. First, who are the youths I'm talking about? And then second, why these youths? Why we talk about them? And then what they did during this pandemic. So how to define the youth? Who are they? The WHO, the World Health Organization, defines these people as the individuals in the age of between 10 to 19 years old, and also the youth as the 15 to 24 years old. Well, we have some different definitions of the younger people, but I will offer you my understanding on this age of group. So first of all, let's talk about something we see from the Western world about these different generations. So this is the, you see this is a representative about the Generation X. That's about like the Black Panther Party from the United States, which is also known as the BPP, was a political organization founded by these young, African Americans in 1966 to challenge the police brutality against these African American community. And this party was active in the US from 1966 until 1982 with different chapters in the numerous major cities and the international chapters like in the UK and Nigeria. And then it's come to this generation Y, the millennial. So this is a cover page published by Times in 2013. It talks about in each country, the millennials are different, but because of globalization, social media, and also the exporting of this Western culture and the speak of change, these millennials worldwide are more likely to be similar with one another than the older generations within their nations. Like, of these all common characteristics are overconfident, narcissism, materialism, and addiction to technology. And then we came to this generation Z. We have this, representative Greta, right? It's also what's made from the voices of their generation. They don't seek attention for themselves as individuals. What animates them is an overwhelming sense of having been abandoned by the adults and the needing to take matters in their own hands. So that's something we see from the Western world. Now let's talk about the Chinese. So we see this, this is like a movie poster talking about the younger generations, how they work really hard in the US and to start their business back in China. That's the whole story. But instead, what I'm going to talk about though is this is the people we call like the 80s, the generation of 80s. So they are very hardworking, and they have the stable family. They feel free and unrestrained. They are optimistic about the future just right after the nationwide cultural revolution tragedy, and they are experiencing the transition from this planning economy to the market economy. That's how they look, or how we understand. And then it came to these 90s, the generation of 90s, right? Like me, I was born in the 1990s, and these people, are, because we have this one-child policy. Usually, we have no brothers, we have no sisters. We grow up by ourselves and with our parents, but we are experiencing, the fast wealth accumulation, either from our family, from our community, and also from our country. And also we are these beneficiaries from this nation's economic reform, and we pay more attention to the independent thinking. We want to pursue our life. And also we feel the rapid development of the society. Something really grows so fast about everything around us. We can't really remember, we can't really see something nowadays that's totally different in my childhood, like the neighborhood or the street or anything. And then it came to the 2000s, that after the Generation Z, these people, they're enjoying a superior life quality because of the consumerism and the materialism of this abundance. And they're much pretty influenced by the Western cultures. However, they have their own diverse cultural identity and creativity. And because there's no longer the one-child policy, they may have their blood like sisters and brothers. And also they are the digital survival of this generation. And we have this statistic about them, like between the age of 15 to 24 in the total population of 1.4 billion people, there's almost like 12% or to 13% of this age of the youth people. And the ratio of males to females is almost the same. And then, almost like 31% people received higher education, and more the younger generation living in the eastern region and in the urban area, because there are more, opportunities, better, education, and also better life quality. And why the youth? why I'm talking about it? Because the Future Circle, not only about myself, but also about the Future Circle. We are a young community that work closely with the younger generations. We have a community over 200 active members, varying from college students to young working professionals and the future leaders. So among our 3,000 subscribers, we have like 1/3 males and 2/3 females, and we have almost 753 people, subscribers in the age between 18 to 25. That's a lot. Takes a lot of proportion in our community. And then I'm going to talk about a feature project we did in the past few years. And we take a method of narrative collage art and invite those young participants to join us and co-create their future scenario with this kind of youth magazines, newspapers, and stickers. And we can tell from this picture, we see this is something made by these younger participants, right? This is talk about, personal care makes me freeze my time. Why? Because these younger people, they don't want to get older. And they want to, they take a metaphor of the iceberg you can tell from the background. And also, this is implying there's the booming market of male beauty in China, as well as the aesthetics of the neutral gender. And before, there's a much bias of male from the culture that man cannot make up or dress up himself. But now we see this younger generation, they claim to be their own identity. And also they claim the rights of the gender equality. And, before we tend to materialize female, but now reversely, we see, females tend to materialize the males. But I don't know if that's also about gender equality or not. So that's something we can see. That's also in appearance about this, appearance. And then the second work is about it's talking about my ideal life. So because people are spoiled and protected since they were young, and when they grow up, they're facing a great pressure from their life, from their job, or from the society to balance their work and life. So they prefer, to stay at home and enjoying all the entertainment rather than, working so hard. At the same time, because of the China's advanced internet technology, right, the e-commerce bring us a lot of great convenience, and also because of the booming home economy, people are able to stay at home and to do everything they want, especially during this home quarantine. So that's kind of such a daydream from this younger generation. So we gather this over 300 pieces of this kind of works, and also we interview them, collect all of their personal stories, and try to understand the youth future from this kind of synthesis. So we work on 3 different areas: foresight, storytelling, and individual perspective. And then we try to compose a holistic view about the collective future from this storytelling. And so the individual narrative here is a phenomenon that includes the past and the future. It is also a reflection on the present and the future, as well as a reinterpretation of the past. So that's how we synthesize all of the keywords you can see from here, from something really negative on the right, and also something really positive. So that can help us to understand what kind of future they prefer or not prefer at all. And then I want to mention about some other project we see from other communities in China. For example, this is something is organized by a group called Big Fish. They're a neighborhood community building organization. Organized by these young people. So they came up with this project about how to connect the communities in the home quarantine. So, so the challenge is, so the traditional method or administration cannot effectively cover each child beyond the basic medical resources during this pandemic crisis. So home quarantine makes each individual and family very isolated, like an isolated island. And then they try to reconnect them again So what we can see here is they try to build a distributed network and to invite people from every different fields and background. For example, they have some social workers, community builders, service designers, scholars, psychology, etc., etc. And then they can, at their free will to team up and then to initiate their project to save the neighborhood, to save the community. So that's how you can, you can see from here, they have like, they can, how to say, team up into different department or unit, but these are quite flexible. They're not fixed. They have the partnership development, the research, the executives, the R&D and marketing and PR. So this is like not like a very strict organized group, but this is kind of like a self-growth, self-driven community. What they did, they built this campaign and the solutions for travelers, from these epidemic areas, because they can hard to know to book the flight, to get a grocery, to access to those medical resources. So they try to build this toolkit for everyone for free to get access to all the different kind of information. And then they also make this campaign of giving a hug to strangers, because there's some discriminations against those people from this pandemic Zooms, or from like other countries, from other, or the international students because of the pandemic. People are concerned about the health. And then they try to, connect people together with this kind of hug. And also they build this as people are isolated, and then they try to make some entertainment. So what they do is they host an improvisational cloud theater. What does it mean? So they invite people from everywhere. You don't have to be like a professional performer, but you can join them and do some show together. So this is like a new form spawned during the pandemic, seems to limit certain manifestations of physical theater while also providing other possibilities for online performance. There's no ready-made script. It is like an original work from the lives of different participants, and consider how to use the technology and form this kind of network platform. So this project is precisely the possibility of action to the public crisis. The original intention is not to make an artwork, but an effort to break free from the home quarantine, to connect everyone at home. That's something you can take a look. So this is something they used like Zoom to make this improvisational drama show together. Yeah. And there's another group, it's called like a Bottle Dream. They're like a young media focusing on the social change makers. So what they do here is they launch a pandemic memo. What is that? It's like a collaborative project for online diary for everyone to journal their daily life. You can do the medical workers can do like some, to post something, and the volunteers can do some workload, and also you can share your emotions, your daily activities, etc. You feel you're strong in a community. Something like that. You can post everything, but you feel you're helped or supported by each other. And also they're publishing like this white paper talking about like the youth actions during this pandemic. They are working on this research and to understand how the youth are reactive to this pandemic, how they get involved into this social movement or social to address this social crisis. And the last example I want to show here is like it's a crowdsourcing photography online exhibition. Everyone, you can share your picture online, and they make that into an exhibition, open access to everyone. And they highly select the artwork created by this artist who work with the screen as the interface to explore and express their imagination and creativity. So it has 3 research focuses: the immersive narrative of the screen, algorithm environment, and the screen as extended space. So we can, take a look. How does it look? This is how the artists, make their paintings or make their photos during this pandemic and share with people, with the public and the social media in this exhibition. So what we learn here from the youth community, okay, young people care much about their community and neighborhood. They're responsible to their community, to our neighborhood. And also we can't fight that virus alone. And also we see that distributing networks really works in the public emergency. And also how we can leverage this media's influence in supporting people during this pandemic. And how can we, beyond the physical support, how can we, support other people, for example, with the open communication, with the information transparency is also important, etc. And, think about what if we can't go out to visit a physical gallery? How can we, take a look? How can we, spend our time in the leisure, right? What if everyone becomes an artist and can share their work online? How to effectively take use of everyone's skill during this quarantine to make some crowd effect. So that's something I want to share today. And last but not least, I want to take a metaphor of the youth from these mountain climbers, to make the change not limited by the rule, create the future they want. They may fail, but the next generation will come again. This is actually the quote from a paper from the professor Sohail in Ayatollah. He said, idealism is at the heart of the young people's vision of the future. It is essentially the desire to create a world that works for everyone, all humans, all planets, and animals. Idealism means the unwillingness to accept the reasons for why the world cannot change or shouldn't change the deep structure of history. So, and if this generation of the youth age naturalize themselves in the prevailing paradigm modeling through there is always the next generation to come. So that's how we wish, we hope, the generation after generation, we can pursue our vision about the future with different possibilities. That's all my presentation today. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhang, for that very insightful and well-prepared presentation of yours. And now we are going to proceed to the reactions from our two invited reactors. The first one is Miss Celine Grace Abella. She is a learning manager at the Development Academy of the Philippines, Graduate School of Public and Development Management. Miss Abella is part of the academic team of Dap-GSPDM that prepared and presented the first strategic foresight framework for the Philippines before the Senate Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovations, and Futures Thinking. Ms. Abella is also a technical volunteer at the Philippine Futures Thinking Society and a member of the Philippine Society for Public Administration. She obtained her bachelor's degree in consular and diplomatic affairs at De La Salle College of St. Benilde, and she graduated with honors. May we now hear from Ms. Abella. You have 5 minutes for your reaction.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. CJ. Good afternoon, everyone. This webinar is very timely since we just celebrated the International Youth Day, and it basically talks about our youth, our future tangled into one. So this continues that thought. First, I would like to thank the speakers for really highlighting futures in action in their respective presentations. From bringing in the picture of futures perspectives, laying out why youth leaders is our hope, especially in these trying times, to presenting experiences on futures, youth, and work, and to finally giving out initiatives and opportunities for the youth to be futures literate, are all indications of what is already there and what is yet to come. You know, as part of the youth, as what Sir Noel mentioned, I am glad that I actually belong to Centennials. It's very forward-looking to think that we are the next in line, ang pag-asa ika nga. So as part of the group, I really appreciated the discussions because They were somewhat an eye-opener to what our generation can do and to what the future holds for our generation as long as we work for it. Towards a futures literate and futures ready world, we have to work for it to happen. The discussions also allowed me to recall one of my favorite lines from the report of the United Nations Brundtland Commission, and I quote, "It is all about meeting the needs of the current generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs." So more than the gaps among generations, it's all about the interconnectedness and influence of our actions that spark hope. The now is our tomorrow. What we do can have a ripple effect to numerous outcomes, preferred or not. And the things I picked up from Mr. Shakil, who shared his journey, is how we plant the seeds of our future to change mindsets and worldviews, to basically change the system we are already used to think of alternatives and to consider the youth as a sector. I think these are important. Then Ms. Anne was generous enough to share their work to elevate the voice of our future, the impact of foresight in integrating this with education and conversations with young people, and of course the volunteer part. I think that is a good project to be part of. One of the action points we can take from the presentation of Mr. Lewis is to be optimistic about the future, even if it is a fast-changing world backed with social, technological, and economic changes. So my context is this. We are currently faced with so much uncertainty, especially during these challenging times, the VUCA world, and it's hard to think about the future. Personally, I find it difficult to react to different situations. Mahirap talaga, and I'm sure some or many of you can relate. I remember asking my favorite author about how to react to difficult situations, and he said, "It's natural to feel uncertain how to react to difficult times, but it's necessary to choose and act. The issues we face are too important to neglect." When we think about this thought, as what Ms. Sheila said, this is about our decision, our choice to act now in order to create the future we want. So friends, ladies and gentlemen, the future is never an assurance, but listening to the presentations, it's a risk we must be willing to enter. So the last part of my reaction is in the form of a shout out. So let's break free from the discussion. It's a shout out to the youth, and the youth at heart, isama na po natin. So I encourage everyone to say, I am part of the youth, therefore I can and I will. Hashtag kaya natin, hashtag Hiraya Manawari. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Celine. I am part of the youth, therefore I can and I will. But I wish I could also claim that I am part of the, centennials, but that will be lying because I'm no longer part of the centennials. Anyway, we will move on to our second reactor. The last but not the least. Our second reactor is the 12th National Youth Parliament Chairperson for the Committee of Environment, a regional convener for Region 6, and a Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative 2019 Academic Fellow for Global Environment Issues and Natural Resource Management at the University of Montana Mansfield Center. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Rosel Morales. Kindly unmute your microphone, ma'am.
Hi everyone! Good afternoon. Isang taus-pusong pagbati po sa ating lahat. I am Rosel Morales, and here with us on the backstage are friends from the 12th National Youth Parliament. This is a very good discussion this afternoon that we had. We were inspired, we were brought in a different kind of emotions, may it be positive or something. I really don't see life as positive, negative. I see it as a possibility. What's positive for other people can mean different things. So perhaps this afternoon discussion, we're a little bit heavy on the lectures, but I want to storytell as what everyone keeps on telling us. No, what I want to say is that, and then I want to place what I learned, and not really. These things are not really new to me, but it's very nice to be reminded each and every day that there are people and communities who thinks like us. So this is my story and how this afternoon's discussion will place in my future story, in my today, and also how it will shape my future. So when I was young, I talk like I'm an old person already. I'm so sorry. I'm just 23 years old, but my mind speaks differently. So when I was younger, I guess, I had a hard time fitting in because it's not new to me to be told, iba ka talaga. May it be positive na parang, uy, iba ka talaga, Ras, ang galing mo. Or parang, ay, iba ka talaga. So, it's not new to me. My mother, who's a suicide survivor, asked me, actually begged me many times to be normal. People who don't understand me, either bullied me, indifferent about me, backstabbed me, and only a few tried to reach out and understand me. But I am thankful for those few people who reached out. And deep inside, it hurts to be bullied. It hurts to feel like you're different in you're 23, pero you don't belong. It hurts, you know. But I don't blame these individuals. I think that deep inside, we are all hurting. Our current system is messing with us one way or another. And we pass on the hate. And I don't blame people for that. But for my story, I said that for years, I hate my being different and carried the trauma of being different. Throughout time, though this is something positive, I think I learned that maybe we don't belong because we are meant to create a better world. Baka hindi tayo nagbi-belong because we're not meant for this present. We are meant to shape the future. We are crazy now, but we will be normal maybe in the next few years. So my call to everyone is basically this. Let's recognize our frustration so we can transform it into inspiration and it will guide us into our actions. I like what Miss Sheila said earlier, that to think of the future is revolutionary because we look beyond our current challenges. And in my experience, I was diagnosed with depression. Um, I was it was hard for me to get through poverty because I worked for my education. When I was 17 years old, I was working 12 hours a day to earn around $2 a day just so I can go back to school. So it was really hard. As a woman, I was sexually harassed on the road, in school, even when I'm a youth parliamentarian already, lobbying in the local scene, I experienced a lot of sexual harassments from legislators themselves, and it hurts. And this is before, I did not really have a community of support, but I don't blame them, as I've said. I'll tell you why later. I like that Kenji said that he learned the futures thinking, this kind of mindset from Stanford. In my experience, even before I found out, and very privileged to find out about PhilFutures Thinking Society, thinking about the future was a way for me to escape the present that was really challenging for me, and I can't accept that this is our present. Hindi ko kaya. Hindi. I think that we can build a better future. So I held on every single day that we can create a better world. I forgot who said this. I think it was when I was in the US na sabi niya, to die is easy, to live is harder. So I live every day because I want to see a better world. I want to also discover a better Rosel each and every day as I grow. There are different challenges along the way, but these are one of those few things na, oh my God, if I just gave up yesterday, I could have not met PhilFutures Thinking Society. So there are reasons to live every day, even though sometimes the world is really challenging for all of us. But I want to also put a question on the table. Sir Noel said earlier that there's a lack of salat sa hiraya, kulang sa imahinasyon ng Pilipino. I want to put something on the table to forward the discussion. Are we really salat sa hiraya? Kulang ba talaga tayo sa imahinasyon? Or there's just an unjust system in the status quo that clouds our eyes? I don't like to blame individuals, and this is the reason why. It's not enough that we're saving people. We have to ask the question, why can't they save themselves? So we have to recognize that there is inequality in the system, and that inequality is a challenge. We, all of us, have to address to enable everyone to imagine and dream of a better future. I like it earlier that Shakil said about Ivan Illich. We're reading the same kind of authors, but I want to bring into the table the thoughts of Paulo Freire of the pedagogy of the oppressed. He said that we have to trust the oppressed, that one day they will rise up against this oppression. They will rise up into, and we have to trust them. So that's the challenge this afternoon. I think that PhilFutures Thinking Society and the rest of the organizers being here today talking to us, even though there's a lot of challenges happening in the society, they could have slept this afternoon and bumawi sa tulog, kulang tayo ng tulog lahat minsan, but they did talk to us because they have hope in us. And I like that. And so the challenge for everyone right now, all of the youth, and millennials, everyone who thinks like youth and who have hope, is let's ask ourselves today, where are we? We are here because we are privileged enough. Even with all of my challenges, I am privileged enough to be here. So paano natin yun magagamit? How can we use this privilege to help other people who's not in the same room? So, to end, kasi ang haba na ng sinabi ko, no? To end this afternoon, I said that again and again, I want to thank the organizers, the PhilFutures Thinking Society, for creating another spark for this revolutionary thinking. And let's imagine a better world. For me, I live every day, even though I battle depression inside my head, because I want to see a just, fairer, kinder world. And this goal is not only an individual goal, this is a collective goal. Sabi ko before, I said before to Sir Sherman when I met him in one of the events for the youth too, I said that I really don't think as positive, negative, but I have always a healthy delusion and a healthy delusion of trust in the people around me, that they will grow and progress. And I want to claim this. I want to claim that the future is for the women and the minorities. I want to claim that the future has stronger communities, and not the power is not on the people who's sitting right now. The power is on the people. I imagine a world that is green, just, fair, and I imagine a world that all of these privileges are accessible to all. Mahilig ako mag-karaoke. I like singing. So kahit boses pala ka ako minsan. So I want to end. As I said, I'm 23 in terms of chronos, or the way chronological time. But in terms of kairos, or the time as it happens to me, my thinking is older. So I want to cite this song released in 1971. I think everyone knows this. I am assuming everyone knows this. It's called "Imagine" by John Lennon. It's quite long. I don't wanna bore everyone. So I just wanna sing. I just wanna read one part and then sing the rest. And I hope you sing with me. It says, "Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today." And then the chorus part. I promise I'll end on this note. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. Maraming salamat po, and God bless us.
Maraming salamat, Rosel. It's an honor that you are here with us. There's actually a comment on what you said a while ago from Sir Ronnie John Barrientos. He said he also believes that it's not the lack of imagination that clouds our view of the future. It's about a system that hinders us to dream bigger because we are told we can't. And now we are going to proceed to our open forum. It is going to be moderated by the Corporate Secretary of PhilFutures and our Senior Fellow at DAP GSPDM and a Professor at UPNCPAG, Dr. Reggie Ugadan. Sir,
Hi CJ,
Dr.
thank
Ed?
you very much. Magandang hapon po sa atin lahat. Hindi ko alam, centennial ba ako or ano, no? But anyway, thank you very much for this very inspiring and insightful talks from our very own Sheila and Noel ng PhilFutures Thinking Society, and of course our visitors Shakil, Keji, and Anne. You know, the discussion made by Sheila a while ago, it provides us you know, it gives us the macro perspective, actually, the theoretical perspective of futures thinking. And she emphasized on the important concepts and principles of foresight and futures thinking. And Noel dives into the very conditions of the Filipinos, maybe the core values of the Filipinos. He talks about what's next. Of course, the very popular song during our time, maybe by that, maybe makikita nyo na, no? Ano bang generation kami. And of course, he pointed out also how we seek futures, right? And I've seen some comments made in our chat box also, and Noel made a very good presentation about, you know, the importance of looking into the future, you know, yung pag-i-imagine, the imagination. You know, when we do that imagination, it's actually an attempt to towards, you know, adjusting or environmental adjustment, and we try to substitute, you know, for facing the reality. And of course, that's a one way for us to advance thinking. And when we do this kind of, you know, futures thinking, or maybe an attempt to make imaginations, it's actually it becomes a pragmatic function, you know, that's more evident in the formulation of our own ideals, you know, of course in a condition that we have this dissatisfaction with the present, and we hope for a better future, right? So I think let's welcome questions from our audience. But before that, if I may just, you know, ask this question so that we can have one or two questions from the audience because of our time, or I just don't know if it will still allow us. I would like to ask to Shakil. I think Shakil have shared to us about his journey on, you know, on engaging the youth, or maybe not the youth, because not just the youth, I should say, but, you know, of course, engaging people towards, you know, towards future. There is this a kind of an idea coming out also in futures literature, talking about the discipline of anticipation. I think if you can also share to us, how do you view this, and of course, and how we can take it from it as maybe for our participants today, the youth. Now, when we talk about the discipline of anticipation, what are the important skills or behaviors that we need to have with us for us to have this, you know, a very a view, a correct or a perfect view of the future, or and how to go with it, or how to strategize on achieving them. Shakil.
Yeah, cool. No, thank you for the question, and I think I'll just give you I think my own perspective towards it, because I think yeah, I think the thing about this field, I think it's constantly evolving, and I think having said that, of course, I think there's I mean, to the extent that I think sometimes people try to distinguish between anticipatory futures and then future studies, and there are different schools of thoughts and paradigms within this field. But I think I mean, of course, like the idea of the futures of futures thinking is not to just remain in the future, but to connect it with the present, right? And I think whatever future we imagine or prefer, or we discuss or we create together, it always comes back to like, what do you want to do now to work towards that? And I think sometimes it's difficult, right? It's difficult in the sense that when you're trying to create a future, it's difficult to actually get all the voices in the room, right? You can't get like 6 billion people on the planet together to discuss that this is the future that we want. And sometimes futures at times can become oppressive, right? Like in the sense that you've seen that different times and different leaders having different utopias in mind, oppressing it on people, and resulting in whatever you call it, an autocratic state or genocide or whatnot with particular. Of course, that's the extreme vision, but a lot of the times we try to push our futures onto other people, and I think in anticipation, it's slightly different because you try to like anticipate like what's coming up like immediately, or what's emerging, like what's next, and how do you actually react right now. You're not necessarily trying to create this hegemony or like this oppression where this is the future that we all need to go towards, and therefore blah 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 blah. But then to be able to anticipate that, in order, if this is coming up, then how do I react now? And I think so. But then I mean, in my perspective, like it is all futures at the end of the day. I mean, I think like even if you're anticipating, you still have some sort of direction in mind. And I think that's the important thing, that I think I mean, at the end of the day is to be able to talk to each other, converse with each other about what do we collectively want. So it really helps you guide, this is what I'm going to do on an individual level. So I think for me, even though there are these different terms out there, it's pretty much in the same spirit. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Shakil. There's a question here that was asked also by, I don't know if it was already asked a while ago. It's addressed to Keji, I think, that
Yep, I'm here.
yes, a questions, how our youth today will adapt for new normal if most of us feel depression and anxiety from the pandemic.
So so you're asking the new normal, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, I'm thinking about like especially, you know, there's a term called the generation after the pandemic, right? So these people, I think, you know, they're more deeply how to say digitalized than ever, because, you know, for example, like you know, the online gaming community, like the what's the name, Animal Crossing, it's like a go viral in China, and I know in other countries, like you can do whatever you want, like, you know, to build your own community, or you can meet with other friends, or even go shopping in a game, in like a totally like an open game. So I think, like, you know, so this generation, they will be more comfortable with this kind of digital tools, and also even take that as, you know, the majority part of their life. And also on the other side is, you know, we feel like, okay, there is no necessity, you know, to go out, or you know, it's become costly and difficult to meet people in person, you know, afterwards. So I feel like, you know, this might be a new normal, but that's something we have to discuss. Is this really something we prefer about the future or not? You know, because for me personally, I'm still think, you know, the personal, the in-person connection, or the physical life should be still important for us to have this, you know, multiple sensories and connection with each other.
Oh, great, Kenji, thank you very much for that. If I may, I'll just ask one more question, and let's go back to our questions to posted in our chat box. What do you think? Is national culture really relevant, or really playing a role in looking at the future? Maybe, for example, for KG a while ago, he presented the case of China, and of course Shakil, you already have some engagement with different countries, so not only Bangladesh, right? So is national culture really playing a role in this? Or maybe you can look at For example, maybe the idea of, you know, the culture on individualistic or maybe collectivistic culture that it's really out there. Is there something we can, you know, relate on how we see or we view the future? Maybe we can start with Shakil first.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Could you just rephrase the question again? Like
I mean,
national culture into, yeah.
And national culture and you know, on how we view the future or how we really act towards a desired or maybe a desired future.
Yeah, and of course, I think it really determines like who defines national culture and who's writing about it, and as to what if you ask, I think each person in the Philippines, what is national culture, may be different. People will have different answers or different ways in which they talk about it. But then, of course, there will be an official version that this is the national culture that we are following. But I think, in that sense, yeah, I mean, I think those that is important. It is important to that really like does have a sense that really that I mean, it is a narrative at the end of the day, right? Like what the national culture is. That story can actually drive your own identity. That okay, like in order for me to be Bangladeshi or to be Filipino, like I need to be like this in order to be part of my national culture. And of course, even irrespective of whether culture is fluid or not fluid, depending on which country you're from, like I think it works both ways. Like you as an individual, I think should have agency towards shaping your national culture. That's one. And number two is you can also like embrace the national culture as feeling that you're as a part of a collective. So I think it should ideally be a two-way relationship. It's dangerous when it's a one-way relationship, where the national culture only. Yeah. So that's my perspective.
Thanks, Shakil. How about Keji, please?
Well, I'm thinking about like, you know, I definitely agree with Shakil. Like, you know, there's I would say the push and the pull, right? The pull is the tradition, you know, the traditional cultures, right? We still, you know, have this kind of, how to say, like collectivism, right? And also we have this kind of, you know, how to say this, the group identity, right? How to say, like being like a people, like a citizen or something else. But on the other side, I mean, the characteristics of the youth group, right? The young people, they like something new. They like to experience and explore something different or break the rule from the past. And that's something I see. That's something to pull that's something to push us, you know, to be closer to the futures. For example, right, in the major cities, we see nowadays there is so like more and more, you know, self-driven younger people communities, right? That each community represent, you know, how to say, like a different part of the subculture of the young people. And then as this something, you know, scale up, right? Then they bond together, and then it's gonna indicate something about the main trends about the future. So that's how I understand that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, KJ, for that answer, and Shakil. There's a question here. I'll take it from the chat box, from Ray Aliana Lagasca. He's asking, how do we embrace an effective futures thinking perspective if present situations are uncertain and our knowledge of the past, our memories, we no longer want to consider? Or is this kind of thinking is something we need to get rid of? Maybe we can, either Shakil or Kazi can answer on this question.
Yeah. Sure. I think so there's a few ways, and I think when situations are uncertain, that's probably like some of the best times to do futures thinking, because the idea is to open up your alternatives and not think that only one thing might happen, right? Because sometimes we might sometimes we think that uncertainty is scary and becomes a negative sort of cycle in that thing. But the idea about future thinking is that you open up the possibilities and the alternatives, and then to, like, even in a lot of the scenarios, work to understand what the best case is, the worst case is, or what is a radical case, and all that really helps you to be more prepared that these are the different things that can happen, and therefore how are you going to react now, or what sort of strategies are you going to build so that you can work towards the best and avoid the worst. That's one. Yes, I think it is important that you try to learn from the past, right? Because it is important that to analyze why we are in this current situation. One sometimes has to look in the past and sort of realize that, okay, these are the different reasons why we are where we are today. But having said that, we don't have to be stuck in the past, right? Just because something has not happened yet doesn't mean that it's never going to happen, right? And just because something has happened before doesn't mean that it's going to happen again. So, so thing is that we can learn from the past, definitely, but then definitely not to be stuck at it. So yeah, so I think whether things we want to get rid of, maybe thinking that just thinking, the type of thinking that narrows down alternatives, the type of thinking that is intolerant to other perspectives, the type of thinking that where you don't want people to talk to each other and to shape their collective futures, is the type of thinking you might want to discard.
Thank you very much, Shakil. I think I'll ask this question to Keji. The question from Oliver. Oliver is asking, how can the youth and businesses use futures thinking to adapt and go through the economic recession brought by the COVID-19 pandemic?
That's a really wonderful question, because we also have many discussions about this, about how we can evolve this, how to find those business opportunities from the youth community, and we talk about that, and actually we see there's some successful cases around us, and also even we see there's how to say, like an agency, right? So they are, how to say, they're hired by these brands, by different corporations, but they closely work with different youth communities, and then they can work something together. For example, maybe these corporations or these brands can become like a sponsor, or they can maybe they can give some guidance toward these young people, how they can host or organize their different kind of event. And also on the other side, for the for the corporations, right, they also want to listen to the voice of the younger generation, because that's about the future, that's about like the business, and even talking about the whole environment about the future. So I can tell this is definitely there is the business opportunities with this younger generation in the future.
Oh, thank you very much. I think I just have one question left here. Maybe Shakil can answer this question, if it's all right. How to deal with the new normal and how to empower our youth today?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about this new normal. I mean, I think I'm just wondering that, like, when the Spanish flu happened, I'm sure that it was a new normal also after the Spanish flu, and we don't know like what's coming up, right? Like, if we think that climate change is going to get worse, if we think that these things might happen again, we might have multiple new normals to adapt to as we go forward, right? And I think it's really like, I think adaptability, like I think really questioning our assumptions, right? Our narratives of success, right? Is how much is success defined by individualism as versus collectivism. And I mean, I think I'm sure during this time, a lot of people are asking these questions. But of course, the moment that everything opens up, maybe some of us will go back to our normal ways, and it might seem like nothing has changed. It's back to some people are just waiting to go back to normal, right? But we know that something has happened, and I think it's important for all of us, and not just schools, like all the institutions, like for the media, for cultural institutions, for each and every one of us to actually question that what just happened, how come we weren't, like why are we here in the first place? And I think and sometimes it's easy to make superficial fixes, but really thinking about like what sort of beliefs that have led to the world that we were troubling it, and if we change my beliefs, then what sort of world do we need to work towards? And I think and I think part of it goes to the last question is like, how do we empower today's youth? I mean, a lot of different things. I mean, you can start experimenting with now. Like we will I mean, of course, like even this PhilFutures Thinking Society came up during COVID-19 as well, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's inspiring to see that people are using this time to actually reflect. And I think I mean, I think the youth are already empowered. It's just that maybe like you said, like the systems are preventing from everyone to work together. But I think but hopefully these sort of spaces will help us have these conversations and figure out more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Shakil. Thank you very much, Kaji, to our, of course, to our distinguished speakers also for today, and also to our participants. And in behalf of the PhilFutures Thinking Society, we would like to thank you for your participation in this event, our first thought, Dap-ayan, or a conversation with the youth. And also we would like to thank CJ Almadal for facilitating the activity for today. And we're hoping to have more activities like this conversation, talking about the future, engaging more with the youth, and of course with Shaquille and Luis, I mean Keji, in the future also. So maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. A lot of information will be, of course, you can visit the Facebook page of the PhilFutures Thinking Society, and also the website. A lot of announcement on the future activities, upcoming activities of the PhilFutures. So thank you very much. I think if it's all right also for us to have a group photo, if it's for us to end the conversation, the Dap-ayan today.
Yes, sir. Yes, Dr. Reggie, we will have a group photo. But first, I'll just give the floor to Miss Sheila for a few announcements before we
Yes.
end. Miss Sheila.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much. So I would just like to announce a few major things that PhilFutures is working on, and we're so excited about this. We're accepting members now. We've done our first membership orientation in August 3, and we will have our next one in September 5. So please join us. And we will host the next Asia Pacific Futures Network. It will be a virtual conference, and we would like to invite you to join us there. And we are going to set up a session just focused on the youth. We would love to have you in that conference. We are also the home of the Millennium Project in the Philippines, and we will be working on the State of the Future Index. So if you're interested in research, please do join us and volunteer with us. And of course, as I was saying, the DAP Certificate for Futures Thinking, where a lot of our team will be the instructors there. So as well as our Global Advisory Board will be part of the faculty of that certificate. And of course, next Saturday, another free event that we will be holding. This is the Future of Education, Learning to Become. Join us on Saturday, and we will post announcements in our social media account. So do follow us. Thank you very much, CJ.
Thank you very much, Miss Sheila. I just like to acknowledge also our guests from the University of Southern Mindanao, Western Mindanao State University in Zamboanga, Central Bicol State University of Agriculture, of course, in the Bicol region, Philippine Normal University, and from JPSPA. So I think we are well represented from the north part of the Philippines, middle and going to the south. Okay, so this concludes our webinar for this afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Sheila, Sir Noel, Mr. Shakil, Ms. Anne, Mr. Keji, Celine, and Rosel for your time this afternoon. I'm CJ Almodal, and it's a pleasure hosting this event. May I request everyone, if you're comfortable, to please turn on your video camera so that we can capture a group photo. Celine, on your count.
All right. On my count, 1, 2, 3, smile everyone. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank
Mabuhay
you.
kayo, mabuhay tayong lahat. Ingat po, take care, God bless.
Kiraya Manawari.
Iraya Manawari
Iraya
sa lahat.
Manawari.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.